a very full program that we have today. And to follow up on the topic of advocacy and community action is the presentation we have before you is effective communication with legislators and their staff. And facilitating the panel this afternoon is Mr. Tom Tagliabue, who is the Director of Intergovernmental Relations with the City of Corpus Christi. And he will now introduce the panel.
Thank you, Lisa. Good afternoon. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tom Tagliabue, and I am the Director of Intergovernmental Relations for the City of Corpus Christi. I've been there just over a year, but I have about close to 25 years experience in the legislative field. I have the privilege of working with these fine colleagues here at the table that I'll introduce. First on my left is State Representative Tagliabue, who is the chair of the House Criminal Jurisprudence Committee. He is in his 4th term in the Texas House of Representatives. Next to him is Bob Howder, the new district director for U.S. Representative Blake Barenthal of the 27th Congressional District. And to my right is my colleague, Gabe White, who succeeded me years later working with State Representative Todd Hunter. She is the district director for State Representative Hunter in District 32. We'll also be joined a little bit by Mr. Bob Blancado, who you met during lunch hour. I want to pass it over first to let Representative Chairman Herrero start and talk about ways that you as constituents, you as advocates can help communicate your message to the legislature, to these staff members who you'll be working with on a regular basis. Representative Chairman Herrero.
Yeah. Thank you, Tom. Good afternoon, all of you. Before I get started, and she's walking to the front, our district director, Dr. Matilda Sines, is our district director, and what that means is she essentially works out of the Corpus Christi office here in Corpus Christi, which is located at the Wilson Plaza building at 606 North Caronqua, Suite 103A. And some of you may remember this, but when I first ran, I let people know that that is the same building where my mom had worked as an elevator operator many years when she was working 2, almost sometimes 3 jobs at a time. And so it meant a lot to me to be able to go back to that building and, first as a lawyer working on the 17th floor with Royston Razor, but then also as a state representative and knowing that that's the office where we're located. But if you visit that office, you'll run into Dr. Matilda Sines, if not at some other events. And so, especially during session, which is normally 140 days, this year went into special sessions, which kept us longer in Austin. But whenever we're not in Corpus, Dr. Sines tries to make it to as many events as possible when we're not able to make them ourselves. And so that's one way of communicating, whether it be with us directly as an individual, whether you see us at any function or any event. Also, our staffs are also very knowledgeable of the issues. And in fact, when you give me an assignment as a representative, you as being the constituent, I then turn to the individual in our office that I think can help best give you some answers. And so a lot of the local issues are directed by Dr. Sines on addressing those concerns. If it's legislative, we also work on those issues directly, and some people may think it's too early to get started on anything, and it's actually not, because sometimes what you find out, there's a lot of legwork that is required in filing legislation. So you have to do all that before you begin session, because once session starts, it moves really fast, but then really slow. So the deadlines come up pretty quick. The bills tend to slow themselves down, or others slow them down. And it's intended that way purposely. The only bill by Constitution that is required to be passed is a balanced budget. All the other bills, all the other laws that get passed are additional bills that get passed. And the only one that we as legislators are required to pass is a balanced budget. But in communicating your issues, feel free to communicate with us directly, by phone, by email, by fax, and then now with new technology, it's even come to us as Facebook. And so we get a lot of questions now, especially through Facebook. And all of those are viable ways of communicating. And I always encourage people, whether you see me in the office or at the grocery store, let me know what issue you have or some way that we can be of some help. And sometimes it's issues that have come to me by an individual that say that we're at the mall. So if you look at geographical lines, that's technically not in the district that I represent, but I like to go shopping, right? And so someone may come up to me and say, hey, we've got this issue, it's pressing, and we need your help. And sometimes they'll confuse me for the U.S. representative, and it'll be a federal issue. And I explain to them that we will do everything we can to help them, but for a more immediate response, it would be best to communicate with the official that is in that capacity at the federal level. And so we direct them to the congressman's office. And likewise, if we happen to have a constituent that comes to us from Flower Bluff, for example, that's not the district that we represent, and out of courtesy, we extend that to Chairman Hunter's office and say, one of your constituents brought an issue to us, here's what the issue is, and then they move it forward. And so that's a courtesy that we as state reps extend, and I've had people from Brownsville call me and say that they have an issue, and then, because they know me or they know a friend or a relative, and that's how we communicate with them. But we try to defer to the elected official that's within that area and give them the opportunity to address their constituents' concerns. But any and every way that you can think of communicating that serves as being the most effective way for you to communicate is the best way to do it. And we even do block walking as well. So when it comes time to walk, we'll be out there and we'll run into people that have expressed some concerns about an issue. And sometimes it's a local issue. I had a woman who called and explained that the garbage man was not picking up her trash when they were supposed to. And what we do at that point is we say it's a local issue. City officials are the ones that can help you, but we also make a phone call for them and say, this is not our issue, but on behalf of a constituent, if it turns out to be a constituent, this is what the concerns are. So forms of communicating, really pretty much anything that is most convenient for you as a constituent.
Well, thank you. The representative pretty well summed up the ways in which you can communicate, and things are changing constantly. We too get notices by Facebook, email. I know one of the questions Tom had given us that might be on your minds was, what's the most effective means of communication? I'd say from just a personal basis, the most effective basis is one-to-one. And to be able to take whatever issue it is that you're trying to convey to a legislator with your own personal antidote or story. That has probably the most effective way of communicating something. He also said rank the effectiveness. I know a lot of you have probably sometimes been asked to sign on to an email or sign a petition or sign a letter. That's effective, but it's probably, at least in our office, probably one of the least effective ways, because we don't sit there and count up how many are on one side and how many are the other. It's far more important to understand what it is that you're advocating, and that can be done much better in a personal way. Other tips. I can't tell you how many people come in, and if they don't get to see the legislator themselves, they feel like they've been shunned or they haven't been listened to. As you heard the representative say, most times the issue is going to be passed along to a staffer anyway. They cannot possibly do every single thing themselves, and each office is usually broken down into, I know in our office we have 5 legislative assistants, and they have different priorities and responsibilities. And if you came to us with an issue with, say, seniors or aging, it would go to the individual who works on that. So meeting directly with that person is helpful as well. We all share everything. I got an email from a woman the other day. She said, I hope you're not like one of those district directors who never tells the congressman what his constituents are saying and only gives him good news. I don't know about the other offices, they can comment on it, but if somebody emails me a question, I copy the congressman. He needs to know that, whether it's good or bad, and we share that information with him. So I would say to you, if you're up in the Capitol, whether it's in Austin or in Washington, if you cannot meet with the member for whatever reason, don't feel the member's not sympathetic, don't feel that they don't care. Realize that if you talk to someone in the office and can share that information, that's very important, and that will get communicated. The other thing, always try and leave something behind if you have, because we'll try and take notes, but if you have even a one-page that has in bullet points or some kind of summation of what it is that you're looking for. The other type of communication, don't assume because someone says, and we get this all the time, I'm sure you do too, they'll come up to us and they'll say, well, what's his position on H684? Well, H684 means it's House Bill 684. That means there were at least 683 before it, and God knows how many after. Okay? I have no idea what H684 is, and you can't imagine how people were looking, well, why don't you know? And it's like, well, give me a clue. What does it do? What do you want it to do, or what don't you want it to do? So that's another thing. Be prepared to talk about the issue and how it relates to you and what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And again, anecdotally, if you could say, this is how it affects me. This is how it affects the industry I'm in. This is how it affects the profession that I'm in. Those are all things that are worthwhile. The other, I guess if I were going to give you tips, do your homework. Look at, go to the website. It's so easy today. I mean, I started in this business long before I even want to share it with all of you, but today it's so simple. There's not a member of the State House or the State Senate or the U.S. House or the U.S. Senate that doesn't have a bio online. And when I say do your homework, when my mother, she's passed, but when she was in her late 90s, she was actually 96, and she was living in an assisted living home. And so people came in, and the first thing they said was, well, you probably don't understand this, but let me tell you what it's like to care for someone who's 95 years old. I said, yeah, as a matter of fact, I actually do. My mother's in an assisted living home. She eventually went to hospice. All of those things are learning experiences for us as representatives or the representative of representative. And sometimes it's important to do your homework. Look at the bio of the member that you're going to talk to. You know, is he married? Does he have children? And you want to go in and talk about student loans? I'll tell you, with Congressman Farenthold, he's got a daughter at Georgetown and another one at Vanderbilt. He understands what student loans are about. Okay, so that's important too. And if I were to give you one last piece of information, you can do this if you want, but it's probably the least effective. It probably don't threaten. You know, we all know that you're a constituent. We're meeting with you because you are our constituent, and we'll meet with any constituent. But to come in, well, I vote for him, and I just want you to know that, you know, I'm watching what he does. We know that, okay? And if you want to say it, go ahead. I'm just kind of giving you some tips. It's kind of like, you know, you sit there and go, okay, great, all right, well. And then I guess I'll end with just a short story. I'm in this business because of what government was doing to me. I was 24 years old. I had graduated, had my own business, and was running it. Thought that I knew everything. Most 24-year-olds do. My 24-year-old tells me she does. I was operating a business. I thought everything was going fine, and then all of a sudden things started. I started having difficulties, and it wasn't inventory. It wasn't my customers. It wasn't anything. It was government. And every time I turned around, government was coming in telling me that my sign didn't fit with the sign code ordinance, or my employees didn't have the proper license to install the carpet, because I had a carpet store. And there was a really nice gentleman who lived next door to me, and he was very patient. And every day I would go home, I would sit on the porch and have a beer with him and complain about all these problems. And he said, well, what are you doing about it? And I said, well, what do you mean? There's nothing I can do about it. And he goes, well, you registered to vote? And I said, no. He said, have you ever registered to vote? I said, no. And he goes, do you participate in the process? I said, no. And he said, well, I'll tell you right now. Any person, this was a number of years ago, he said, any person who attempts to run a business in this day and age and doesn't know their state representative, their state senator, their congressman, their mayor, and their city councilman by their first name is operating at a severe disadvantage. My question to him was, okay, if I accept that, what do I do? How do I get involved? How do I get to know these people? Because to me, they were so distant. And the representative made a comment about in the grocery store. We do see people in the grocery store and at the Little League games and, you know, the hospital and all throughout the community. But at that point in time, I had no idea. And so he said to me, find a candidate forum. It happened to be an election year. He said, go to the candidate forum, listen to the people that are running. Find one who you feel the most affinity to, who you think represents your views. And then go up to them and say, I'd like to help you get elected. And I said, is that easy? And he said, yeah. So the first thing he said was, figure out if you're a Republican or a Democrat. And that was the interesting one, because I had to go to there wasn't websites in those days, but I had to go get information to make that determination. But I went to the forum, sat and listened to about 6 different people running for different offices. Figured out that I didn't like any of them. I didn't really like what any of them said until the last one. I went up to him after the meeting, introduced myself, and said, I want to help you. His comment to me was, well, that's really great. They tell me I need a campaign manager. Would you like to run my campaign? I doesn't always work this way. I said, I don't know. We went out and had a cup of coffee. When we left at about 11:30 that night at the coffee shop, I was his campaign manager. I went home very proudly the next day, and I couldn't wait to tell my neighbor that not only had I gone to a meeting, I had met somebody, and I was running his campaign. I didn't realize for a number of years later he'd actually been the state chairman of a Republican party in New Mexico, so he had a lot more knowledge than I thought he did. He looked at me and he goes, you're running his campaign? I said, yeah. He goes, and he was very polite. He didn't say, what idiot has hired you who knows nothing to run his campaign? But he said, well, what's he running for? And I said, sheriff. At this point in time, he really gave me a weird look and he said, Bob, you're trying to run a business, not break the law. You don't need to know the sheriff. I ended up running his campaign. He won. We defeated a 12-year incumbent. And I sold my business about 4 years later, and I've been doing this ever since. I do it because I care and I want to help other people navigate and go through government. Congressman Farrathon, I'll end with this, says he has what he calls red tape cutters, and that's his office. And we have people there who do that, and we try and assist and help. So.
Well, thank you. Being third, I wish I could just say ditto, but Chairman Hunter said, no, I have to speak. So my name is Gay White. I've been the district director for Chairman Hunter for the last 5 years. He's actually been in office twice, as Tom said, because Tom is me, I am Tom in a different light. Chairman was in for 4 terms, from 1989 to 1997, left to raise his children, and he went back 3 terms ago because he didn't like what was going on and he was not happy with the laws that he was having to live under. But let me tell you something really important. He's back in office because of his constituents. We are your voice in Austin. We are your eyes and your ears, and that's why we have to hear from you. We have to know what you're thinking. We have to know what your ideas are. And that is just of the utmost importance in our office. Now, how to get a hold of us? Well, as everybody has said, come up to us. Although I've learned not to be looking at embarrassing things in a grocery store because I've had people tap me on the shoulder. But come up to us in restaurants. The representative always wants to meet his constituents and hear what you're thinking. Call us. We have 3 offices. We have our capital office, we have an office out on Padre Island, and we have an office on South Staples. call us, make an appointment, come in and see us. And also, we actually like to we get excited when we get handwritten letters, because that seems to be a lost art. But let me just give you one little clue, especially for you advocates, and if you're talking to large groups and trying to get them rallied. As Bob said, form letters, that really doesn't get it. We want to hear from your heart. We want to hear in their own words how they're feeling on an issue. So let's do it a little more personal, and that's our office. It's a personal touch. That's how we want to deal with you. Tom asked us to touch a little bit on the difference between effective communication and less effective. Here's what we need to know. We need to know, who are you? How do we get a hold of you? What is your issue? Do you have an idea for a new law, a modification of an existing law? Have you seen a situation that you just downright don't think is right? Something that you think we can help the people of the state of Texas? That's what we want to know. But when you contact us, be clear as to what that issue is and what you see as the solution. Less effective, I have to tell you, I've come into the office many times and there's a message on the answering machine and it goes on for the whole time until it goes click, and they've never left their name and their phone number. And I'm sorry, but I failed mind reading and I can't figure out who they are. So make sure you leave that. Or the opposite is, they say, this is so-and-so, my phone number is so-and-so, click. Let us know what your issue is. As Bob said, with the Congressman's office, and the same with Chairman's office, we have people who specialize in certain areas. That way we know where to direct your issue, your constituents, your advocates that you're talking to. So let's do it like that. And just one last thing, Tom asked us to go into what could be a touchy subject, politics versus policy. Unfortunately, that's always going to be in play. It's not necessarily parties that cause it. We have some issues in the state of Texas that it's one region versus another, and that's in several areas. But what we have to remember is we are all here for everybody in the state of Texas. We're here to make their lives better. So I would just hope that everybody would understand that. But Representative Hunter always ends by saying he's honored to be the state representative for District 32, and I'm honored to have been able to speak for him today. Thank you.
Well, for my colleagues who don't know who I am, I was actually speaking here at lunch, and they asked me to come up and join you esteemed folks on the discussion about advocacy and techniques and things. And so I can put another hat on. I was a 16-year House of Representatives congressional staffer myself, and I remember distinctly what used to work well with and we were from New York City, and they, you probably have the many constituents down here, but let me tell you something. Yeah, New York City constituent people are constant in what they have to say and do. But I think everything that you've heard here is very accurate. It is about the personal communication. It is about the distinct message that you come with. Okay? Some people laugh and say, you got to learn how to do elevator speeches before you can talk to elected officials or their staff. Well, that may be true. Yes, there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. But as long as you have something to amplify it, that you leave behind, it becomes very important. When you meet with the staff people, okay, make sure you have their card, and make sure you do follow-up the very next day, whether it's thank you for the meeting we had, I want to follow up on something we covered. Build that relationship, because that becomes very important in how the elected person follows up, if that person has that specialty that they work on. I think the other part is that you need to, if you are working on behalf of other people, okay, in a senior center, I work with 85 seniors every day, and they care about this issue. You're their person that you're speaking to. If you're a businessman, you employ X number of people. Bring the economic development aspect into your conversation. But whatever it is, it's tied to your role as a constituent, as a business person in the community, someone who cares enough about an issue to want to go to their elected officials and do it. And I think the point about politics and policy, that's a fascinating area, because it really sad, particularly in Washington, there really is no policy these days without some degree of politics. Now, how you separate the things out is sort of your choice, but I think the, being politically active is not bad if you really care enough about an issue that you want to go to that next step. That can any number of different ways. Politics that produces good policy is not bad politics. Okay? But see, you have to sort of separate out where you want to be. That's the area that people are most squeamish about. I don't want to get politically involved where I just want to be an advocate. Actually, you got to make that determination. But look around at who succeeds in getting their message delivered and getting their issue advanced. And chances are there's some kind of a political relationship mixed in with the work that they're doing on advocacy. But I've sat on both sides, and I have been lobbied and I have lobbied. So I know kind of like the points of distinction. But I cannot stress enough at whatever level it is. And I was up in San Antonio meeting with congressional staff to set this morning on time. Staff are critical. They are really critical. I mean, and they're chosen for a reason. They're chosen because A, they have a relationship with the elected official, but B, because they have some expertise to bring to the table that can benefit the elected official in their work. So it's very important to be close to staff people, very important for the elected people to be accessible. And it is about, the last thing about advocacy is that you can't do it once and be effective. I'm an Italian American, as you've heard from before, and the people we don't like in our world are Columbus Day Italian. One day a year they become Italian American because it's Columbus Day, or St. Patrick's Day Irishman or something. It doesn't work. You've got to do it constantly. The session is important. You have to know how long the session runs and how long it runs. But your issue is going to go the whole year. And the more you're building and reinforcing your position over the course of the year, the more you're going to be respected, by the way. If you're a one-time Charlie, boom, and you're not going to, you don't hear from him again, who cares? But you're back over and over again, you're going to get it. So those are just some top-head thoughts.
And I'm glad, Bob, you brought up a point I made a note to talk about is relationship building. And you're right, you cannot do it just on a one-time as you need it. You have to build a relationship with that office. And I have the privilege of having a long career like these folks have. And the only way you do anything in this business is because of a relationship. No, I would not be able to do anything for the city of Corpus Christi if I didn't have a relationship with these offices to be able to go in there and say, here's what the city of Corpus Christi is concerned about. This is why it's important to you and to your district and to your constituents. So building that relationship over the years is critically important. Y'all have any other, I'd love to, since you've heard what the others have had to say, y'all have any follow-up comments before we open it up to questions? Chairman?
Gay was mentioning, but it is important for us to know, I think of my daughter who's in school and they're learning how to write. And I don't mean it in a negative way, but it helps us to know, the who, the what, the when, the where, the why, and the how. Because that'll help us to know. I spoke with a gentleman and he was telling me about all his issues and going on and on and on. And so I stopped him and I said, okay, so what do you want? Like why did you call me? What do you think I can do to help you? And that's when he told me, well, this is what I would like. And so it helps us to know not only, who you are and where you live, to know how to get back to you and your phone number, but then also, if you could break it down on those issues, then that helps us to know what we're dealing with, where it happened, maybe potentially why it happened. And those are some of the questions, like I'm calling because I don't know the why. Like, why did they do this, or why didn't they do that? And so that would help us to understand how to approach every issue.
Well, I'd like to add one thing. We talked about policy and politics. What I'd urge you to do, and unfortunately what happens in both capitals, or all state capitals and the nation's capital, is we're becoming a nation of Republicans or Democrats, conservatives or liberals. And don't make the assumption just because someone is a Democrat or a Republican, that they're not going to necessarily be sympathetic to what you're trying to do. Because you will be surprised. We are all products of life experiences. We all approach things differently. For all of the things that you hear on Fox or MSNBC or any of the 24-hour talking shows, members don't just vote because it's a Republican issue or it's a Democrat issue. Members cross the lines lots of times. And whatever your issue is, don't come in with a preconceived notion that, you know, for instance, well, because he's a Democrat, he's going to be against this. And that's why I go back to telling stories. If you can equate what it is that you want and how it impacts you or how it impacts someone that we represent, that's far more important. And don't get turned off by all of the things that you see. I mean, it's probably more partisan today than I've ever seen it, but that doesn't mean that members can't rise above partisanship and support issues. And that would be, I think, if I would give you anything. Be prepared to come in. Don't come in and prejudge just because it's a Republican that they're going to be, you know, against X, or if they're a Democrat, they're going to be for you. Because sometimes you'll find out it's a little different. And again, as the representative said, tell us. Be prepared to let us know. Let us know how, and the better you can relate that, the easier it is to be able to try and help the people that you're advocating for.
And let me add on to what Bob just said. When you call any of our offices, we don't ask anything more than, how can we help you? We are here to serve you, so do keep that in mind. I also wanted to point out that when you call with an issue, like in Corpus Christi area in Oasis County, you have 2 senior representatives and you have a senior state senator, and they work together all the time. So don't think just to contact one office. Contact all of our offices so we can work together to solve your issues. Many of your issues will not just be in one area. They are going to be a statewide issue. And when you've got 3 senior members behind your idea, it really does make a difference in Austin. Just keep that in mind.
Y'all, let me ask one question. When we talk about these issues to bring up to your offices, can you talk a little bit about the timing of the expectation that some issue comes up just in a short period and they want you to respond right away, rather than giving your office advance notice, giving you a couple of months briefing prior to before you have to act on something? Can you talk a little bit about how advantageous that is, or if you only want to hear from them when it's time to act? Anyone want to tackle that at all?
I'll go first on that one. Unfortunately, I have a legislator sitting next to me, so I have to be careful. They're a lot like I was in college. I studied for the exam the night before. Most work in the legislature I've seen over my years gets done the last weeks, days, and hours. They put stuff off. It happens all the time. I remember in Sacramento, I worked in the Capitol in Sacramento, the speaker was always known for going up and stopping the clock at midnight on the last day of session. I mean, he literally unplugged it, and they would be in session until 7 or 8 in the morning trying to get everything done. So I wouldn't say that I expect you to come to us 2 months early. Sometimes you have no idea. I mean, there's things like gut and amend, which is you take a bill that says it's dealing with auto insurance, and all of a sudden it's gutted and amended and it's dealing with pets. I mean, that happens. So what I would say that you should do is, if you know that there is something that you're going to want to lobby or have your opinion known, develop the relationship as early as possible. You know, someone told me a long time ago, and I'll give you this example. I'm going to go back to my office in half an hour. There's going to be notes on my desk. And it's going to say, the congressman wants you to call him right away. Or one's going to say, your wife would like you to call him right away. One's going to say, counselor for your daughter called, and another one may say a constituent called about da-da-da-da-da-da, or, you know, the insurance, whatever. Think about the priorities, okay? I know which one I'm gonna call back first. And if you know a legislator, I'm not telling you.
Chairman, should I ask you?
But what I'm saying is, you know, let's say out of this whole audience here today, one of you comes up and talks to me afterwards. We get to know each other. And you say, I live in Corpus Christi, and I advocate for this, and, you know, maybe sometime we could have a cup of coffee. And we go out and we have a cup of coffee, and we get to know each other. Well, I know you better than I know the person who I've never met or seen before. And I gotta tell you, most of us, and all of you, we have, busy lives. And we try to get to things as we can. And the way the legislature works, if you take the first premise of what I said, which is they do everything at the last minute, you don't want to have us take the day or two to get back to you when something's maybe happening in the next hour or so. So that's why I'm saying, develop the relationship ahead of time. Have them know who you are so that when you call, and it is a last minute issue, you might get bumped up above somebody who doesn't.
Yeah, I'm going to try to approach this in two different ways, but the short answer is it depends. If it's legislation, for us, at least in the legislature in Texas, we don't meet until every odd number of years. So if you already know that there's an issue that exists, it would be good for us to start working on that now. Because what we do in our office, we do our homework. We try to figure out what the issue is. You know, as far as legislation, what is the issue that you believe that exists now? How is it that the existing laws don't currently help in the situation? What are the proposed ideas that you have? Who would be in support of it? Who would be against it? And what are maybe potentially unintended consequences that could result from this proposed legislation? All of that takes a lot of time to get done. And we need to start on that now. And so I've already talked to people about legislation for 2015, and we continue to do so. When it comes to constituent matters, we take them whenever it happens. I had someone call me just yesterday that says, I need your help, this is what's going on, and I need it by Monday. And so we try to figure out what is the issue. You know, what is going on that requires this immediate attention? What is the proposed solution? Can we be of some help or not? I had a call this morning saying, you know, the sequestration at the federal government's level is cutting Head Start programs. You know, it's terminating 4,000 people across the state. It's affecting children. And I said, I understand. I said, unfortunately, that's not a decision, the sequestration issue is more of it's a federal issue. You need to call your congressman. And they said, okay, thank you for taking my call. And I said, anytime. If I'm available, I'll call you back. I'll take the call, and if I can, I'll call you right back. So for me, in our office, if it's legislation, we need to do our homework, and we try to figure out as much as we can about the issue, what exists, what doesn't exist, how can we give some help, what are the proposed solutions, what are some unintended consequences that may have not been thought about. If it's constituent matters, we work on them immediately, especially if you can tell us, this is my deadline. And so when I call staff to say, here's the call that I got, you know, here's what we need to know, this is what they've told me, call these people, and I give them suggestions. And they do. I had another gentleman who called last week that said, I need help. I think I'm being treated unfairly. And so I said, okay, tell me what the issue is. And so his had an immediate deadline. And it was going to not only affect him, but his family. And so we made some calls, and that one ended in a happy note. We were able to help and provide some assistance, and it worked out. But we don't go based on who it is that brings it to us, or, you know, whether we know you better than others. We go based on the importance and the priority and the deadline. And that's how we approach it. And so if we have to put every resource that we have on that issue, we will, given the deadline. So it just depends on what the issue is. But if it's legislation and you know what it is already, then, you know, give it to us now, please.
We, at lunch, I'm glad you brought sequestration up, because we spent a little time on that during lunch period, and I think, if I'm guessing right, it's probably half the room is going to have something to say about sequestration before the end of the month, with concerns. And the suggestion that I made was that they go to their congressional office and the Senate office and bring real data to the table. What does it really mean that we have a 5% across the board cut? What does it mean in real, actual service? You mentioned Head Start, that's certainly one. Senior Meals is one that's getting a lot of attention now. Research grants, transportation programs. And there's a time sensitivity to that too, because they know that Congress is in recess till September 9th, and this is the opportunity, the access to the member back in the district. So that's probably as good an example as there is. That's one that's, it's federal, so you know where to go to. And that's important, by the way. People should know the difference between state and federal issues if they can. You know, make their lives a lot easier and make your visit a lot more productive. But sequestration is that issue for this time and place as it relates to Washington.
We've got 15 minutes left in the program. I'd like to open up to the floor and ask any questions of our panel. Please raise your hand, stand up, tell us who you are, where you're from, and then ask your question to our panel. Anybody with questions? Don't be shy. No? Anybody?
You know, I'm not shy.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Janice Shu with 211 Texas, and I have a question about communication on issues where the funding is not at threat for that program. Do you still want to hear communication from an entity during the session or in between the session? Is it good for us to keep that top of mind awareness for a particular issue? If we know there's no funding threat.
The answer is yes, because even though it may not potentially be threatened immediately, you know, for us in the legislature in Texas, again, I said it's different because it's every 2 years, and so you can anticipate when we would be meeting and what the issues would be. And again, remember that the only bill that we are required to pass is a balanced budget. So, you know, I don't think you should ever assume that any program is not subject to be either increased or decreased in funding, because every 2 years, the funding for that program is considered, at least at the state level. And so it's good to know the funding that we have received so far has been great, and these are the services that it's provided, these are the people that it has helped, and you know, for that reason, we hope that you would continue to support this program because it is valuable and necessary and it helps your constituents. Likewise, if you feel that the funding, you know, is good, but you know, there's going to be an increase in the number of, you know, people that you're servicing, and you know, we want to plant the seed now, so that when you come up, you know, in 2015, you understand and know that if there is any money available, that you would help make this a priority in funding. And so yes, the answer is yes. You know, it would be good to know, because I don't think you should ever, as anyone, assume that if it's requiring funding from any governmental entity, that is safe and secure, because we don't know what's going to happen. And it's good to know that the funding that has been received is in fact working and is efficient and is effective in what it was intended for.
Well, just quickly on that, I would say, I agree, you should too, and sometimes it's just good to have someone come in and tell you about something that's working, and it's working well. But more importantly, we call them hidden agendas. Just because you think it's going well and it's not being threatened doesn't mean someone's not threatened. okay? It doesn't mean somebody else doesn't think that there's a pot of money that, you know, they should have a part of, or that you're misusing or something. So to continue and always let us know, I think that there's never a reason not to do that. And it goes back to what I said earlier about building relationships, coming and talking to us. If the only time you ever see somebody is they want something, just, you know, that's human nature. It doesn't mean we're not going to see you, and I'm not going to listen to you, but if you come in and say thank you, or hey, this program's really doing well, and it's just an opportunity to continue building that relationship, I take every opportunity to do that.
I want to give an example of something that happened in my prior career. I worked at the Texas Water Development Board prior to coming down to Corpus Christi. And we were in the middle of a fiscal year and found out it was when the economy hit the tank, and we had budgets, we had grants and loans scheduled to go out to different communities for water and wastewater programs. In the middle of the fiscal year, LBB came out and said, well, we don't have that kind of money anymore. The revenue projections were off, and we're going to have to do cuts, agencies across the board cuts. Well, that kind of screws with you. People have expectations. Those communities have expectations and have budgeted around those expectations in your biennium. You're going to have this money. You're going to have those dollars for program delivery. So yeah, it's really important that you keep that information front and center to your legislators, because you want to then be able to tell them, hey, if you cut this, if you're doing what you say you're going to do, it's going to affect this many, it's going to affect, in my case, a number of communities that would not be able to do water delivery or wastewater improvements. So, you know, I've had that experience in my own professional life, and I think that's important for you all to keep that communication throughout the year as well. Any other questions out there? No? All right, well, feel free to come visit with any of us one-on-one. We appreciate your time. Thank you for having us, and enjoy the rest of your day.